When you reach those places, you know, of where the decision is, do I do it? Do I say something? Do I take the role? What is the decision I make? Where are you? Do you think you really want it or you cannot live without it?
If you believe we can change the narrative, if you believe we can change our communities, if you believe we can change the outcomes, then we can change the world. I'm Rob Richardson. Welcome to Disruption Now.
Welcome to Disruption Now. I'm your host and moderator, Rob Richardson. With me is Robi Reed. Honored to have her. She is a legend and a titan in the industry in Hollywood. She's a veteran. She's been around for some time, though I can't tell. She looks great.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So she is an expert director and a talent and casting director, Emmy-winning casting director, and you've discovered a lot of people. Halle Berry, my first crush, Samuel L. Jackson, Jamie Foxx. You also have many movies, School Daze, 125 episodes of In Living Color, which I still think, by the way, is the funniest show ever. I always thought they were funnier than Saturday Night Live. Not that I don't like Saturday Night Live. I just thought In Living Color was just the best. So I am honored to have you here. I've grown up watching a lot of things that I didn't know you were behind and helping create, but I'm a big fan of yours now that I know.
Well, thank you. Just to correct just a couple of things. Didn't discover Sam, but have been, part of some of his most, I'd say, groundbreaking roles.
Okay.
Jungle Fever. But discoveries for me, I would say, Jamie Foxx.
That's a big one.
Derek Luke. I'll share Rosie Perez with Spike.
Okay.
So there are quite a few. I've been in this game for a long time, so I think a lot of folks can look to me saying, well, maybe that was my first audition or my first job,
right.
First movie role, so on and so on.
I mean, like you said, discover is kind of a loaded word anyway. I mean, help cultivate, gave more opportunities, no matter what. I mean, you've definitely, I think, before a lot of these folks were household names, you did see the talent in them, from what I can tell. And cast them. So discover, like I say, is a big word, but you did see the talent and gave them opportunities and roles, which makes a big difference. So I actually read something about you and said that you knew you wanted to be a casting director at 15.
Yes.
Which is really early to know what you want to do, and you've been blessed enough to follow that journey.
Yeah.
Because your brother was a child actor, correct?
Correct. Yeah, he was. My brother. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
My brother was a child actor. He started in commercials, then he did television, and I would accompany him on his auditions while my parents were parking the car. I would run inside with him, sign him up. And one day I just asked the receptionist who the person was behind the door that he was going to meet with. And she said, "Oh, well, that's the casting director." And I said, "Well, what does a casting director do?" And she explained it to me. And I was a teenager, and it just was like a light bulb, and I said to myself, I can do that. And I didn't know at the time. I was an avid reader, and I could not get through a book without putting actors in the place of the characters that I was reading. Like before I could finish the first chapter, I had to do that, which I did not know at the time. I was just prepping myself for what was to come. That was casting. Wow. So, by the time I was out of college, I pursued it. So I had an early start.
So what advice would you give your younger self? It can be maybe at that time when you're 15, or maybe when you were just getting out of college, pursuing it, whatever you want to take, whatever point in your stage in your career. What advice would you give your younger self looking back now with the experience you have? That's the first part of the question. And then what advice would you ignore given your experience that you have right now?
My younger self, I think that it would be okay to take more chances. And, I guess really not be, I wouldn't say there was a fear of failure, but always wanting to get it right, and it's okay not to. Yeah. So I would tell myself that would be okay. More of that. More of that fearlessness. Huh?
Do you think you would have listened?
If I knew then what I know now, I would have. Yeah, but I think too back on some of the things I did, and most of it was because I didn't know any better.
Right.
That really was an act of real confidence and fearlessness.
Sure.
And as I got older, I feel like that began to kind of, something else took over. I took more precaution. So So it sounds
like you want to tell your older self to tell your younger self to keep that same mindset.
Exactly. Be more of that. Yes. I made lots of cold calls back then. And I called myself a casting director long before I became one.
Yeah.
So,
is there any moment that you say, because you said you would have taken more of a risk, is there anything that just sticks out of your mind? Like, that's something looking back that I learned from that I would have just gone all the way with knowing that now. Can you think of is there anything particular that sticks out in your mind?
What would, okay, well, this really was more of when I was in school, but I think it certainly would have definitely played into my young adulthood. But I had an opportunity to go abroad to study and to do as an exchange student. And I remember signing up for the program, getting accepted to the program, because I had taken Spanish all of my life and really wanted to immerse myself in the culture and the language and learn it as a real second language. And at the 11th hour, I just, was like, no, I'll wait. And of course, that opportunity did not come back around. So, I would say that would have been one of the things I would have done differently for sure.
Any advice you got through the years that you would tell yourself to ignore?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you got plenty of examples of that one.
What other people say and what other people think, I would ignore that.
Yeah.
You can't listen to everybody. Certainly be mindful of who is in your close circle. And I hear that now, even, as this grown woman that I am, you still have to be mindful of that. But growing up, because you're so impressionable, and I would listen and took everything in. So I would, definitely be, have more precaution in that area.
Well, there's scientific proof to back up what you're saying. So literally the people that you're around, even if you're around people that you think that you don't agree with how they frame the world, their morals, so on and so forth, science has shown that rather than your beliefs, you being able to protect your beliefs, if you hang around people long enough, literally they rewire your brain and you think like the group around you. So, what you're saying is, backed up by science too, which is kind of freaky, but it's very important, like you said, who you let in your space. When you look at what's going on right now in terms of, hopefully we're moving past this pandemic, but I know that the pandemic has forced a lot of people to be intentional and about their time. And I know with me, I've cut off quite a few people and I've actually been more focused than I've ever been. But has this pandemic done anything to kind of highlight, clarity of purpose in terms of not only who you hang around, but what you're doing in any way?
Absolutely. It has. It definitely forced us all to take a seat and, gave us plenty of time to think. And I had much I've thought about, and certainly how I've spent my time, who I spend it with, and, how much more time there might be. Yeah. So it just gives you a whole appreciation. And I always believed that I was one that appreciated time and did not take it for granted, but I have a whole new appreciation for it.
Yeah.
And respect.
No, I agree. You have to often, when you're telling stories, you have to often fight against this narrative. And actually, before I get there, erase that. I'd like to talk to you about this pandemic and what you think it could have done for the next normal with the industry. This has been a pivotal moment for our nation, really the world in a lot of ways, a combination with the pandemic and also with the world having to watch the injustices that go on every single day for Black people, really. But people being forced to they weren't distracted. They couldn't be distracted by every event every night. It was, you saw it. You just couldn't ignore someone's life being choked out of them for nearly 9 minutes, the Ahmaud Arbery, so on and so forth, all the things that just came back to back to back. And this moment that, I think there's been at least some general greater awareness of what's already happening. Now it may go away, but what do you think is the next normal for this moment specifically with the movie industry, because and entertainment, because you spent your career making sure that the full story is told, and not just the narrative from the dominant culture, but the full story is told how the world actually is. Do you think this is where do you see the industry going from this moment? And what do you think the next normal looks like going forward?
That's an interesting question. I think that, the next normal is people really staying in the space that is more so authentic and true. Whereas because it's the entertainment industry, you can easily get caught up in what isn't real, right? But where we are now with things being so in our face, be it the injustices, the racial injustices, the, pandemic, you can't hide from it. So I think those stories that will be told will continue to be in this authentic space. There's no more excuse. You can't go back, It's like I tell people about self-tapes and auditions, like there's no excuse for a bad tape now. It's like you have all the information. There's the ring light, there's this, there's that, and you got to get it right. So I think staying in that space and really telling stories and seeing the world as it truly is, and that's everybody being represented. Yeah, every color of person being represented.
Yeah, and I've seen, and there's no excuse for the individual who's doing their taping, but there's also no excuse for Hollywood, for Netflix, for so on and so forth to not present greater stories, which they have been doing and think we can do more of. But it's been shown that these things are not only the right thing to do, they're actually very profitable. People want to see them. People want to see it.
And it's like you can't just do it for a time and stop. This is it. It's here. And even with the accountability, not being able to get away with doing the things that have been done for so long, being excluded, those organizations and entities can no longer exist in that way without being called out on it. And then big, powerful people, companies, corporations, studios, however, getting really behind it. So we see it unfolding before our very eyes right now.
No, we do. And I also believe part of the next normal is, I'd love to get your comment on this. Do you see the streaming kind of war and services expanding opportunities, or could it actually limit opportunities? What do you see with all these now? HBO, Netflix, Prime. I mean, I don't know. There's probably a ton of them I don't even know about now. Disney. There's a whole lot of streaming services out there. Do you think this is providing greater opportunity to tell more stories that are more intentional, or do you think it's not doing that? What's your perspective on this moment?
I think it's definitely providing more opportunity to tell more stories, to tell just the variety of stories, and then the amount of stories too. Because if you're streaming, you have to have a lot of content.
True. You got to keep new content.
Yes, content. And then if you're linear, there are only a certain amount of hours in a day where you can get things on television. Streaming, it's around the clock. So it's definitely here to stay. And I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I can tell you this is something that I want to do. I will eventually do after I complete the startup I'm working on, a few other things. But I think really having a full Netflix or Prime, whatever, series on the full life of Malcolm X, like really, because I've read all the books about him, and there's so much that wasn't told, and I really having a breakdown of his episode from like his life when he was Detroit Red, to his time in prison, to his time growing up as a youth. I think people would be thoroughly entertained, and to all the things that happened, that 2 or 3 years within his life. Like right before his life, and he did so much. Like he did in that 2 or 3 years, it was like a spy movie, because he had his fight with the NOI, and he went overseas, and he had to fight the CIA. Like people don't know that stuff. I think people would find that his life was extremely fascinating. Obviously, we had the movie, which was great, but really breaking down, he can literally have an episode, a whole series just about his life.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. He was a man. What I loved the most about Malcolm X, and we did so much reading and research when we made that film, and Spike, of course,
Yes, I love that film. One of my favorite films. And by the way, Denzel should have won the Oscar for that too. But go ahead.
He deserved it.
Absolutely.
That was the Oscar-winning performance. He should have been nominated and won every award for that.
There's no question. That was.
He became Malcolm X.
Yes, I mean he was Malcolm X.
It was uncanny. Like on set, he would remember I interviewed him once and I asked him if he was a method actor or what was his technique, and he was just like, I just become. It's not one where you might have the Meisner technique or the Stella Adler technique. He was just like, I just become the role. I do the research and I become the role. And he did. Like when he was Detroit Red in the club, you didn't see Malcolm.
No, you didn't. You saw Detroit Red.
Just, on set, in between takes, he never dropped it. Always was it. When he left for the day, he did.
Yeah.
He didn't wear it at night or anything like that. But so those were great times. And I agree, Malcolm X, the thing I loved most about him was that he was always evolving.
Yes.
And always, wanting to learn. And so no recognizing that you never know too much. And so I just really have a lot of admiration for him.
No, I mean, like I said, he's it's just so much great to really go and so much to learn from him. And the autobiography was a great book. But there's other books too that really just do a great job of talking about his history. And I just had, like I said, he really went through a whole lot, and there's just so much that people don't know, and we can learn more about America. And really, and I think we're seeing more content like that. Right. Judas and the Black Messiah, things like that, getting people to tell the full story of what actually happened in America. And we're not talking a long time ago. We're talking about in the 70s. We're talking about right in most people's lifetimes at this time. And the hope is that people can learn from that. Like, what do you think is there's obviously pushback, right? Part of why I believe that why Malcolm X wasn't nominated is because of what Malcolm X was talking about, and the fact that people didn't want to be reminded of Malcolm X, and it was controversial. What can we do to make sure that we don't get too nervous about controversy and make sure that we are still telling the story? Because I think, Malcolm X, the reason why he didn't win, I'll still go back to that, is because the content of what he was talking about wasn't popular, and they didn't want to celebrate Malcolm X. See, look, when he actually died, the newspapers said a hate monger died or something like that. That's basically what was told, which of course is not the accurate description. As we still kind of fight these narratives, how do you advise somebody? Everybody doesn't have maybe the conviction of I forgot the Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman. Like, he said that he wanted to make sure that whatever role he was playing, he wasn't perpetuating stereotypes. And that cost him, I remember the speech, it cost him a role because he tried to say, he told the director, like, I think we're doing this in a stereotypical manner, but can we do it this way? How do you advise a actor who has a core belief, but there might be a director that wants to perpetuate a stereotype? Like, how do you navigate that, trying to make sure you make it in the industry versus staying true to who you are? You understand my question?
I think that what you have to do is, that's tough, because you want to be true, but you want to work. It's a real fine line, but I think you have to just, as an individual, just be really committed to what your core belief is and your truth, and stay there, and then I think everybody has, their limit. And again, I tell people, this business is hard, right? And so you have to, once you make the decision, if you want to be in it. My mentor told me a long time ago, when I was a little bit at a crossroads, and so many people were saying, oh, you should really pursue the performance side of it because you got this, you're talented, you look this way. But I always felt like casting was for me, but there was a moment where I questioned it a little bit. Well, maybe I should, listening to people. And he said to me, there are, two types of people, those who think they really want it and those who cannot live without it. Which one are you? And I could very easily answer that question. So I would give that as advice.
That's
when
great
you
advice.
reach those places, of where the decision is, do I do it? Do I say something? Do I take the role? What is the decision I make? Where are you? Do you think you really want it or you cannot live without it?
Yeah, that's great advice. So can you think about a time this industry, you mentioned the industry being hard in Hollywood. Can you think about a time when it was a really tough moment? Maybe you failed, you had a setback, but later on that ended up being a great opportunity or a great learning lesson. Is there any moment that sticks out?
Again, I think I call it the fearlessness, call it ignorance or whatever.
Yeah.
What do they call it? What is that saying? God takes care of fools and babies. But I remember just really thinking I was invincible to a degree. I went to an HBCU. I went to Hampton.
Okay.
And that's what they taught us. Like we could do anything. I believed it. When I was given the opportunity after working really hard, that presented itself for me to cast a big studio film.
Yep.
And the studio film starred a big celebrity who at the time, was very valuable to the studio. And the studio wanted someone else to cast the movie. It was the person's very first directing, opportunity too. He was also starring in it, and there were a lot of hats he was wearing. So they felt that a more seasoned, casting person, not of color, would be a better.
Of course, always a more seasoned person. Never like you don't have the experience, but they never give you the experience to get the experience. But go ahead. Yeah, I know how that works.
It's a catch-22.
Yeah.
So I had to say that. I knew I could do it. There was no doubt in my mind. And I just remember taking this meeting with the studio heads and them trying to really discourage me, telling me all of the things that could go wrong. Like this really happened. Right. Well, this might happen. This could go wrong. What if? And I remember just saying I'll do this. This will be the solution to that. And I just had no doubt, right? Also that star/director, writer, producer believed in me and stood in support of my decision. And when I think back on that, glad I made the choice. I cast the film. There were times when I really thought, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Yeah. And maybe, with a little bit more experience, I might have, sought another, not opinion, but someone that I knew I could really kind of turn to when there were challenges that I really had to work out myself. Right. Because I think after putting myself in that position, I thought I got to figure it out on my own. Yeah. When I didn't really need to. Yeah. I mean, I think that's so important. I've seen that. Specifically with the Black community, because there'll be sometimes members of my extended family and we can help them, but they don't want to seek advice. They feel like they want to do everything on their own. I'm like, that's not how people get ahead. So it's not like, so some people do. And just like, some people do get ahead that way, but that just because that happens, like if you drive a car and you shut one eye and you make it to your destination doesn't mean you should keep doing it that way. Like there's an easier way to do it. I mean, but I think that's so important for us to learn, like this thing about being self-sufficient, is a lie. It really is. Like it's an ecosystem. Right. Exactly. So it's, you've cast some big stars. So like we talked about that earlier. When you cast Jamie Foxx, you did quote unquote discover him. Did you see all this potential in him? Like, did you know, like, early on you could just see, and if so, like what did you see in him that you could just see that it was there? Yes, I did see it. I saw Jamie on stage at a club. I was casting In Living Color, the pilot,
Okay.
And was actually my mentor, who was best friends with Jamie's, at the time, his like manager mentor person, Harvey Fuqua. My mentor is Peter Long. And I had been around the country with Keenan Wayans. We were going, we basically did a 6-month search in like 6 weeks, literally. It was insanity. Like, I don't know if I could do that today. That's another thing, another one of those, you kind of just go for it, not knowing any better. So I was at the end, of it. And we were just getting ready to kind of go into the network phase where we were showing them our choices. And Peter called me to tell me that there was this young kid that Harvey, had taken under his wing, and he was a student at San Diego State University, and he really wanted me to see him. He had been at the Comedy Act Theater the night before, and would I come down and that day, just check him out, he would make sure he got on stage. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm so tired. This was a Friday, after a long week. And I said, Peter, I'll do it for you. All long story short, I go, it's Jamie. He hadn't yet changed his name to Jamie. It was still, his government name, Eric. And
I didn't even know he had his name was, I thought it was always Jamie Foxx. I guess I didn't know that. I just learned something new about him.
There's a whole story around that one too. But yeah, his name is Eric Bishop. He's from Texas, Durrell, Texas, I think it is. Yeah. So anyway, I remember thinking this. He was not only just funny, but I knew he was an actor, and I'll tell you why. In one of his pieces in his routine, that lasted maybe 10 minutes, he did a whole monologue from Shakespeare, right? It was Hamlet. And I realized that this person really had a control of this very classic piece of material,
Right.
And he must be classically trained. Well, not only was he trained, theatrically, but, he was also very musically gifted. I saw all of that in his routine, and his characters that he did. Like, he wasn't just joke, but he had full on developed characters to me that said acting, ability. And, the rest is history. I just knew, though, from that moment, like Jamie was doing the character on In Living Color, the Wanda, the ugly woman. He was doing that in his routine, at the beginning. Like, that was one of his characters. He created, so yeah, it's no surprise that he's still at the top of his game and continuing to evolve.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really quick to have a couple of rapid fire questions. So, you have any? What's some of the funniest like behind the scenes in Living Color? As I told you, In Living Color was one of my favorite. Can you think of something that people just don't know that happened behind the scenes that's just like hilarious that people wouldn't know otherwise?
That's what you had to ask me that before. I would have thought of more things, but one thing I could just think of is how funny it was. Like, there were so many takes where we were laughing so hard behind the camera that we had to hold our breath, stomachs hurting. And when they said cut, we were like, screaming because it was so funny. Some of the ones that stood out like that were, of course, the Men on Films. Yep.
Oh
gosh. And them just walking around in between the takes in character. Those were always so funny. And then the Homie the Clown. And
Homie the Clown was on my, I remember that.
The Clown, the Homie Don't Play That.
Yep. Jim, the firefighter, what did Jim Carrey play?
Wanda.
Yeah,
no, was she the
No, Jim Carrey. Like, he played the firefighter.
No, I'm saying that one of those though had I think she was the weight, gosh, what am I trying to say? Lifted the weights, the bodybuilder.
I know you're talking about. Yes.
That was Jim Carrey too. Jim Carrey. Yeah, he was hilarious. Tommy, everybody had something really special and funny. And I remember seeing Crystal Tikima Kama's audition. Really, it wasn't an audition for In Living Color. But at the time, you have to remember, this was late 80s. So we didn't have, obviously, the internet, and the tapes that anybody was fortunate enough to make, they had to put in the mail, and send. And they were all half-inch tapes. So you had to like watch it from beginning to end. And I remember just sitting in a sea of half-inch tapes myself and Shemin, who was my associate, 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch. I'm sure you might not even remember what 3/4 is, but they were really big tapes that mostly were used in television, and having to watch them and working into the wee hours of the night. And this one tape I put in, and it was Crystal Tikima Kima doing all of these different characters.
Yeah.
And the character that she did that stood out was the little girl. I can't think of the little girl's name, but that character ended up finding its way onto In Living Color and becoming a favorite, where she lived in Black World, and she told this whole story about how beautiful Black World was. Yeah. So.
Yeah. You know what? You just that's awesome. I just had an idea come to my head. So, something I'm working on right now, and I'll show you after this tape very quickly. But I'm creating an NFT. You know what NFTs are? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm creating an NFT platform that is focused on diverse creators and collectors. And we're about done. But a good idea would be to really feature some of those moments if you have them in a way in a living color. I bet people that would be awesome. You know, some of the takes from those moments. Just a thought. Yeah. So, all right, couple of rapid fire questions. What's an important truth you have in your life or conviction that you have that a lot of people don't agree with you on?
Wow. An important truth that a lot of people don't agree with me on.
It's a hard question on purpose.
Everybody agrees with me now. Gosh.
Yeah, this one gets people a lot.
Yeah.
All right, I'll try to come back. I'll come back. Okay. How about this? Okay, you have a committee. They can be living, they can be dead, they can be a combination thereof of advisors to advise you on whatever, life, personal, spirituality. Who are these three people and why?
Dr. Maya Angelou.
That's a good one. What would you want to talk to her about?
Oh, gosh. How she went from, the experiences in her life early on to becoming this woman of such great wisdom and stature. Where she got her confidence from. Okay. Because it didn't start out that way.
Sure.
Who else? Malcolm X.
Yeah, Malcolm's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And we've already been over, Malcolm. Okay, who's your third?
Oh gosh, who would be the third one? This is a tough one because it's only one more.
It could be anybody. It could be advisor you have, whatever.
Peter Long, he was my mentor. And so I think that because I, so young, I listened to him, but there were so many times when I think back on it that I should have asked more questions. Yeah. I used to think he was so bullheaded, and my thought was always like, you think you know everything. Yeah. He knew more than me, so Peter Long, so I can ask him more questions. Okay. Any question that come to your mind you'd like to ask him right now? Hey, I'm not going to tell you no. Hey, I'm supposed to ask, so right. Why not? Okay, you got final question here. You got a logo, billboard that sums up your theme in life or saying that you believe in. What does that say and why? The logo, theme in life. What would I want it to say? With God, all things are possible. All right. Robi Reed, thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate you having you on. You're welcome. Thank you.